Welcome back to Change Ed. I am your host, Andrew Kuhn, education consultant from Montgomery County Intermediate Unit 23. And here with me is...
Do I get a title at any point? I feel like I'm just always here with you. Can I be like a co-host?
That is your title. No, here with
you
is the title.
I'm going to keep...
Everyone's favorite co-host.
There we go. Just going to keep advocating for myself. Someday you'll be nice. My name is Patrice and Andrew, also out of the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, educational consultant. Yep, that's my job. Every time.
Great to have you here.
Every time,
Patrice.
Someday I'll remember.
We are so lucky to have back with us one of our favorite guests, Ken Zimmerman.
Yay.
From Lancaster, Lebanon, Intermediate Unit 13.
Yeah, we got it.
All the words.
Nailed it. Ken, it's great to have you back. Thank you for coming back on the show.
My pleasure. It's great to be back. It's good to see you all again.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for you. This is a Lancaster, Lebanon, IU 13 Zimmerman favorite question, which is...
Here we go.
Who is your favorite host of the show?
Don't feel like you have to answer that.
Oh my goodness.
Andrew's just going for a quick grab.
Is that
here.
what it is?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, all three of you are fantastic.
Thanks.
Look at that. Well played, sir.
All three of us.
That.
Too bad Tony's not here to hear that.
Yeah.
That's right. In his absence, he's still fantastic.
I've never heard that about myself, so thank you.
That's
because I wasn't there to hear it. Maybe
There you go. That's right. That's right.
So, you know what? I'm going to think that people are saying that about me behind closed
They
doors.
are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They are.
You don't need to feed his ego anymore. It's going to be hard enough to get his head through the door.
Well, Ken, we had such a great time with you the last time that you were on the show, and we wanted to have you back so I could ask you more questions.
All right.
And
maybe we'll get to 2 this time.
Maybe we'll get to 2. Hearing your story as to why you got into education, I think was extremely, it was passion driven, but also it was inspiring. And I think also the one thing that we heard a lot of was that it resonated with other people, right? Mm-hmm. That it, unfortunately, you weren't the only one that had this experience where, you were told maybe you wouldn't be able to do something. And I think it really speaks to the power that we have as educators, that our words are meaningful and they're powerful to our students. Yeah. Even our, off to the side conversation, that everything that we do, that we are models for them in their life and the way that they think and the way that they see themselves and their potential.
And they're listening a whole lot more sometimes than we think they are. Yeah. And they're watching even closer than they're listening. Mm. Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate that as well. One of the things that we didn't get to ask you that we're wondering and curious about is what are you currently excited about, that you maybe a project you have going on or something that you see happening in education that, fuels that flame for you, that gets you excited?
Absolutely. So when you ask me that, the first thing that comes to mind is student-centered learning. And I keep coming back to that because when I first started in helping do trainings for teachers of student-centered learning environments, it was all about station rotation. And we learned very quickly and early on that station rotation is truly a stepping stone toward creating a more personalized learning environment. Because we're really focused on one size doesn't fit all. We realize that if we're telling everybody something at any given point in time, a third of them have no idea what we're talking about, or they're not listening to us, or their minds are wandering off on something else. And we need to really chunk that out and divide that group up into much smaller segments. And so our journey started in 2011 with station rotation and supporting districts utilizing station rotation. And even though it seems so simple, for the idea of flexible groups, 3 different groups, one direct, one independent, one collaborative. The challenge is for a teacher who's used to being the one to disseminate all the information, to letting go and letting students learn new information from another source other than the teacher who's in charge of all that information can be a huge challenge, as well as how do I create a real authentic task for a project-based type of collaborative work that the students can do without me in the midst of the whole process, so that can really enrich and even deepen their learning a lot more? How can they go at an independent pace, different than other students at the same time? And then how can I differentiate what I'm doing in all 3 of those stations? And so as I've seen this journey continually grow, we've worked through at Lancaster Lebanon IU 13. We've trained hundreds of teachers in our region, across the state, other IUs, other professional developers, to be able to implement some forms of station rotation. And at that point, we didn't realize that we were going to be moving toward a more personalized learning approach. But we learned that as teachers were getting used to all kinds of different things happening in their classroom, where students are on different pacings and different projects at different times, and they're demonstrating mastery in a way that they've not had to demonstrate mastery before, and they're not all taking the same test at the same time to demonstrate that mastery, that they were ready for more. They said, what's next? What else can I do to become more of an individualized, to really differentiate for each student that's in my classroom? And then they were like, what can I do next after that? Because they were so thrilled with the progress that they're seeing in the classroom that they wanted to grow. So it was so cool through the years, back from 2011. And here we are in 2024, and we're still supporting districts and teachers and cohorts in this model, because they realize that is a stepping stone to be able to get them toward creating more and more student-centered learning environments for their classrooms.
That's really interesting. I've been doing a lot of work. Part of my job at the IU has been focused in the world of math. And so I'm working specifically with districts on guided math.
Sure.
And we did a lot of guided reading before when I was working in the reading world and all that. But guided math for teachers, I work with elementary teachers. So with the elementary teachers has been harder to grasp than guided reading. Have you found that to be similar to what you're finding, or is it just something that I'm running into?
You know, it's perplexing through the years, because no matter the level, no matter the content, there's always teachers that I've heard say, oh, that can't work in my classroom.
Yeah.
That would never work.
Yeah.
And so there are some that think, oh, well, this might be a more elementary model. And it's different than centers.
Yeah.
It's more targeted, a more differentiated approach to learning than just centers-based learning. And so sometimes secondary teachers are like, oh, there's no way that I could let my students do different things at different times. They all need to stay with me, and I need to make sure we're all pacing at the same time, because it's going to go too wild if not. And I always say, hey, I want you to come see your elementary colleagues. I want you to come into a kindergarten classroom and see that even kindergartners can work independently. Yeah. And this is how the kindergarten teacher manages it. Whereas when elementary teachers say, I don't know, I don't know that especially in math, am I going to get through enough content? Am I going to make sure it's covered? And I'm always like, are you covering it, or are you teaching it?
And are you sure that you're covering it and teaching it the normal way? How do you know that they're learning it just because
you're covering it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Although we use that term, right?
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we're going through our pacing guides and everything that we have. But ultimately, we want kids to learn. And if we don't motivate them to learn, if we don't excite them to learn, if we don't trigger something within them to pay attention, we're not reaching them all. And so where are those triggers? Where are those ways to be able to try to figure out how I can get their attention?
So what are some things, and now I'm being completely selfish because I'm doing this work too and I want to hear what you have to say, but what are some ways or things you say to teachers to get them to take the first step into even setting up the station rotations, or figuring out just 3 different groups as opposed to completely individualized instruction?
Right. Yeah. That's why I say don't go. Sometimes when teachers hear about personalized learning, they're like, oh my gosh, everybody doing something different at the same time. How am I going to do this? Yeah. That's way too far of a jump.
Overwhelming.
Right? Like we want to be able to have a nice progression of how we can step into this. And that's why I think when you do the baseline of station rotation, where you could divide up into 3 groups, one direct, one independent, one club, call them whatever you want. Be unique with whatever you want. Don't even have to call it a thing. Yeah. But this is just the way we learn in this classroom. Yeah. So that you give the modalities, and you're focused on a modality of working with you as the teacher, the modality of working independently, and the modality of working with your peers and collaboratively as just the starting point. Don't even figure out how to differentiate yet in independent and collaborative. Figure out as you're regrouping students how you're differentiating in direct as the first initial way, because teachers feel very confident in a direct instruction type scenario, even if they're sitting down and changing it from the lecture to the conversation, from the lecture to the dialogue that they need to be having. But we've also oftentimes found that that's the entry point that you can more so easily wrap your head around. How can I start with this before I start growing into other areas and other modalities?
Yeah. So making one small change.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep. And even if they're saying, I'm not even ready for that. Okay, then how about a choice board just simply to give students different ways to demonstrate mastery? Just that, because that alone can be a really huge thing for some teachers to be able to do. What do you mean they don't all take the test?
Right.
No, they don't all take the test. There's another way they can demonstrate mastery because everything they've memorized to take that test, do they remember it next week at 10 o'clock?
Sure don't.
We try, but they memorize for a test.
Right.
So what if they do some project work around it that it's meaningful to them, and then all of a sudden that's immersive learning, and I now learned it because I was invested in it.
And your recollection of that information will be very different as well. Right?
Absolutely.
Like get into what did I do?
Right.
There it is.
Right.
That's how we.
Yep. Folks, it's not easy. It's hard. The job of a teacher is a tremendously difficult scenario. It's hard work.
Yeah.
And to be expected to fully differentiate for all those 30 bodies in your classroom, no matter if they're small or big, is a huge undertaking. So why not figure out a system or a model or an approach to be able to take in order to be able to start taking that stepping stone into creating a student-centered learning environment?
One of the things I think is so fascinating about everything you're sharing is this idea that it starts with a step. It starts with taking a step, and that we shouldn't expect ourselves as professionals, as people who are committed to education, nor our students to know everything before you take that step.
Right.
You have to take a step in faith,
Right.
and say, I'm going to give this a shot. And also,
Or nor you even knowing everything you're going to do to take that step. We try to be so confident that we weren't going to do it until we know exactly how it's going to work. Let go of that. It's okay to try and take a risk and see what works.
well, and with that, our style for the podcast is that we have questions that we share, and we're like, here's what we'd like to talk about. Here's what we'd like to do, and the concept that we're trying to get at. But then in the podcast itself is being very present, right? So these are, well, I only get to ever ask you one question per session, but when there are other people who ask more questions too.
That's okay. It's my fault. I talk too much.
No.
It's all about being present in the moment and being able to
Absolutely.
just having a real dialogue
Right.
and a conversation. But the point is that if we said, here are all the questions we want to ask, please answer them, right? That's kind of that standardized form.
Right.
We wouldn't get to the good stuff, which makes us who we are, what we believe. Thomas Kuhn talks a lot about a paradigm shift and how you make that shift. And from my perspective, that, making a 1 degree difference now, 15 years from now could be a 35, 45, 50 degree difference for
Absolutely,
you,
yep.
because you get onto that path and you can see more and more and ways to support it, and something that makes it better for, what you're trying to accomplish actually improves your profession overall.
Right.
And you can find yourself becoming a very different educator by being willing to take that first step.
Absolutely. It's like that 1%. Take just 1 more percent. Just go 1 more percent. Try something new. Try it and then add on to it as you learn and you become comfortable.
Yeah, I tell teachers I work with a lot, you can only change up to 10% of your practice in a year for it to be
Yeah,
sustainable.
absolutely.
And 10% is still a lot.
It is. That's a big
So,
chunk,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Make one change. I like that.
Well, Ken, surprisingly, not surprisingly, we're out of time. So I wanted to give you a final thought. And in fairness, I will then take the final thought.
There
I'm
it
always
is.
accused.
Okay,
Every
final thought
time.
and final
There's no
thought.
accusation.
Okay.
He just said I was accused. There's no accusation.
Yeah,
He
you
does
can't-
not let anyone end
You
the
can't phone a
podcast.
friend after you've given your final
Okay.
thought. You're
So
done.
final thought. That's it. Oh boy.
Yeah. Do you have a final?
No pressure.
Wrap it up.
For me, based off of who this audience might be, as educators out there, again, you have a very hard job, but you are one of the job that you have is one of the most esteemed professions that you can possibly have. You're making a direct impact on our future as a country and our future of civility of the human race. And I think that you should be honored. You should be cherished for the work that you do. And we recognize it's challenging and it can be hard, but we so desperately need you to keep speaking into students' lives so that we can all together help change the future.
Wow.
I don't think you need to talk.
Make that final thought.
That was really good.
But I want to add to you, the thing I was thinking the entire time you were talking was that when it comes to these changes, when it comes to things that we're going to embrace, when it comes to things that we're considering or looking at, look at the step in front of you, not at the entire staircase.
Yes.
And I have to give credit to, I'm an adjunct professor, and one of my students said that last night as one of their like quotes that they live by is look at the step in front of you, not the entire
sage
space.
advice.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you've definitely reinforced that. Again, thank you for coming on and
Sure.
sharing this.
Thanks
and
for having me.
You are always
Always welcome.
welcome. You always have a seat here. So thank you, sir.